One of my goals is to bring you access to the top experts and thinkers in the country to help make sense about what is going on in politics today. And today's guest, Molly Jong-Fast, well, she's a good friend, but she's also one of the sharpest political thinkers around. As an opinion writer for the New York Times, a political analyst for MS Now, and a media veteran who knows our political landscape inside and out, she joins us today to break down the real history behind Jeffrey Epstein, how Republicans and billionaires are destroying legacy media, and she gives us a sneak peek into the 2028 presidential primary field. But before we get into it, please leave a comment below and tell me, who do you want to hear from next? Molly Jong-Fast, welcome back to Defending Democracy.
Thank you for having me.
What people don't know is Molly and I regularly communicate off air. We're friends, and it usually begins with one of us saying, this is really bad.
Or is this as bad as I think, or is this worse?
Right. Yeah. So in that vein, I want to start with something that I think is bad, but, is causing Donald Trump trouble, and that is the Epstein files. And I want to start with that with you for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I know you have followed it. Number two, you'll have witty and insightful analysis of it, but also what people who probably all know about you. You kind of grew up in like New York City royalty. So you probably better than almost anyone understand what the fuck is going on with all these people. So what do you make of the latest in the Epstein email releases, Donald Trump's now desire to have the Epstein files released, the House's about face, the House Republicans about face, that they now all want to release the Epstein files? What do you make of all this?
I think you're talking about the cast of characters that we find in these emails are very much the New York of the 1980s, 90s, 2010s. I mean, these emails go up. What's shocking is they go up to his death. So there are emails here about and again, a lot of them are, this was like a mega dump of emails that the Republicans did. And I think we both can agree they did this because they saw they couldn't get ahead of it. So they decided to drown. There's a word for this, right? In legalese, where you try to drown the other party in documents.
Yeah, you try to bury them.
Whatever.
There
should be some great word for that.
There should be like a Latin phrase. Yeah,
right.
I may have missed that day of law school.
Yeah, so clearly they were trying to get it. So in this dump, there are a lot of emails that we don't really, they may, so that maybe he spent Thanksgiving with Epstein in Palm Beach. We don't know.
While president of the United States.
While president of the United States, which is shocking. But but in these emails are these people who were very much the characters of New York society. And of course, they're friends with Trump because Trump was very much one of those people too. And they are, and it's funny because I was reading, the Times had a piece with a bad headline, but I think was a very interesting piece about all the people in there and the world that no longer exists that they lived in, of media moguls and then the ethical questions of Michael Wolff, try maybe cover it, this sort of blurred line between crisis comms and covering someone, which is, by the way, those lines should never be blurred. So there were some real ethical lapses there for sure. But I actually read, there's a very smart New York Times reporter named James, he's very old school. I can't remember his last name now, but he's very old school and smart. And he talked about how he had gone to interview Epstein about the Elon Musk Tesla stuff and he had been in the townhouse and he had seen what a sort of serial fabulist Epstein was. And yet also these men were also involved in this and also probably guilty, but so we'll see more of that. But yeah, it's a world that doesn't exist anymore. It's businesses that no longer throw out, magazines that aren't real anymore. People who all, the Woody Allen dinners and it is a pretty good advertisement for not being in the cool kids crowd.
Can I ask you two geography questions that people from New York may not understand? Number one, where was the townhouse and what does that tell you about the townhouse? Because like when people think of New York, they think mostly of skyscraper, like powerful men
Yeah.
in skyscrapers.
Yes. In fact, I actually want to look up this article that I just read because, okay, so the article is written by a guy called James B. Stewart, who is like a long time New York Times business and a very venerable and smart and old school. So it was on 71st Street across from the Frick. It was now Epstein again. So much with Epstein, you have to say like Epstein said this, but it's not necessarily true. He said it was the largest house. It's like one of those big limestone buildings that it could be used for an embassy. And Stewart actually talks about how the woman who answered the door looked like she was 18 or younger.
Is this like a part of like New York society, where New York society lives, or like is this like off the beaten path?
No, it's a place. So it's the Upper East Side, but the very fancy part of the fanciest part of the Upper East Side in a big limestone that, billionaires have these kind of, they would sell for maybe somewhere upward of $20 million. And they're humongous and they look at on the museum and it's very quiet, but it's also very Tony and and Woody Allen lived down the street. And all of his life, when you see in the emails, he goes to Palm Beach, he goes to well, I don't know if he goes to Hamptons, but he goes to Palm Beach, he goes, he has a private plane, he flies a lot of politicians on his private plane. What I think is interesting is the idea of a person who says to you, because this is a New York thing I've seen before, who says to you, I am a genius money manager, and that is why I have so much money. And in fact, when Stewart comes in, he says, I'm doing currency trading. And that is something I've seen where, and the truth is, I mean, he probably was running a blackmail scheme because the answer for why these people paid him so much money doesn't make any sense, right? He says that some of these billionaires, and again, we know Leon Black, we know Les Wexler, those are like the names we know, both of whom have not had any kind of accountability. But those guys paid him millions of
And
dollars
those are big
for,
New York finance names, right?
right. Well, Leon Black started Apollo, and Les Wexler started the Limited, and now lives in Ohio or something. But both of them say they paid him for state management, right? Like there's no world you pay what you pay $100 million to an estate. Like you just get a lawyer, you pay him $800 an hour. It's not cheap, but it's not 100 million. I mean, that's an estate right there.
My other big geography question, and I want to talk about the more current news, is um, the connection between New York City and Palm Beach is what? Because like I realize Donald Trump has a place in one in the other, but it seems like there's like a lot of going on between those two locations.
Palm Beach, and I say this as someone who spent very little time in Palm Beach for any number of reasons, but there are a couple of things that happen with Palm Beach people. When they get older, they live there, and then people live there because the tax structure is much better than New York. You have older people, and I know a lot of people whose parents now just, so they do, I think it's, I don't know, 286 days, 300 days. You have to do a certain number of days in Florida in order to have those taxes. They're very, if you're spending 250 days in New York and pretending you're spending, you're fucked, right? Like you cannot do that. In fact, they know because they can see your plane, they can see your Easy Pass. So, there are a lot of rich people who just live in Florida, do Florida and the Hamptons so they don't have to pay the taxes.
Got it. Okay.
It's the heartwarming story of
I was going
wealthy
to say, so
people.
that's the relationship between
Refuse
the two.
because the thing is, if you're a rich person in New York, you pay like a 54% tax rate, and if you're a rich person in Florida, you pay a 34% tax rate. Because New York has it has a 10% New York City tax,
And I
and
assume that's going up now.
I would hope. I would hope that's what we signed up for.
What do you make of the New York City elections and the New Jersey elections and the Virginia elections and everything you've seen? Obviously, I assume you vote in New York City, so you probably paid
Hmm.
most attention to that. But the New Jersey elections same media market, like just
Yeah.
across the bridge.
I mean, I went to New Jersey to cover the New Jersey election and talk to Mikey and went in her car and talked to all her staffers. So I think I know probably more about that election than the mayoral, believe it or not. I mean, the mayoral I thought was I think the lesson from the mayoral is that Mom Donnie is a very charismatic politician. And if you run charismatic people, you can win. And if you run them against people who have no interest in the job and just have a fancy name, you can win plus, plus, plus. So I think there's a real case against don't run people just because you think they're famous. But New Jersey and New York, again, it's a very being mayor. No one has ever survived that job. It is a cursed position. So, I good luck to him, but it's not a job anyone. I think it's the worst. I think he'd be much better off if he had gotten a different position, because that position is just it's such a nightmare.
Explain why that is such a hard political office to hold and succeed at.
Because it's such a big city, and it's a big city filled with a lot of different kinds of people, all of whom like to complain, and all of whom have very different needs, right? So you have people who live in Staten Island who are living in a completely different world than people who are living in the Bronx. Staten Island is it's Republican. It's a lot, it's actually now it's more of a mix, but it was a lot of it was originally a lot of Italians. Now you have a lot of Caribbeans. You have just a completely varying degrees of businesses, and it's just very tough. We have a police department that's $1 billion, that's several billion. I think it's 3, 4, 5 billion. I mean, billions of dollars. It's the biggest city in America, and it is spread out and diverse and just impossible to govern. You also have these union contracts you have to renegotiate. I mean, it's just, and you have the effects of climate change. So we're an island.
Right.
Where the water is rising, and we have these. I mean, the thing we've been really dealing with are these micro flooding, where it just starts pouring, and then that has been, we just have a number of different problems that are very annoying. I mean, so we'll see. I mean, there has never been a mayor who has survived the job.
You don't think Ed Koch did?
I mean, yes, but it was 10 million years ago. I mean,
It
Ed
was.
Koch is when we were kids. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, when Ed Koch did okay.
yeah.
I
All
mean,
right.
he was a complete weirdo in any number of other ways, but yes.
But you said you followed New Jersey. So what is your takeaway from that? Maybe a little less. We're also, by the way, not an easy job being governor of New Jersey.
Oh, yes, for sure. And in fact, the first time since in 29 years that the party has stayed
Right.
Democrat,
Yeah.
because usually New Jersey people are so mad, they're kick them out. I think that would more than, because Virginia, and about the Virginia and Spanberger, but Virginia was, you could see how the government shut down and Doge had radicalized, and I mean radicalized in quotes, because not really radicalized, they're Virginians and it's government employees, but where those people had really seen the worst of Trumpism, because Trump, remember, this is an administration that had wanted to put this is to quote Russ Vaught, put federal employees in trauma, right? So that's a state where it's a fait accompli. You knew Spanberger was going to win.
Yeah, and Winsome Sears was also a particularly terrible candidate.
Oh my God. Can we just have a minute on Winsome Sears? I mean, who found that person?
So she was, remember, she runs as lieutenant governor, which in Virginia, and this is no disrespect to the lieutenant governor elect and all the past lieutenant governors, does not have the most robust portfolio as in the Virginia government. Does not, has relatively limited responsibilities, and she runs as the lieutenant governor, and they run separately, but effectively with Glenn Youngkin. And Glenn
Right.
Youngkin wins in a somewhat surprise, post-COVID, kind of please reopen the schools, please let's, and in a model that is really the only way Republicans win in Virginia, which is this very moderate pro-business, sort of mindset. And he doesn't wind up governing that way. But she winds up running as the lieutenant governor as kind of the movement conservative, kind of the
Right.
resident wackadoodle on the ticket, to balance out
Right.
Youngkin, who
His
himself turned out to
right.
be much more of a wackadoodle.
Yeah. My favorite part of the Youngkin story is he wins by 2 points,
Yep.
and he's considered to be presidential material. So Spanberger won by like what, 12,
Oh, I think
15
more than
points?
that. I think it was more
More,
than
yeah,
15. Yeah.
right. So does she get to be president next? I mean, does she, like, can we have a talk about that?
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Molly Jong-Fast in a moment. But I founded Democracy Docket in 2020 to shine a spotlight on Republican efforts to undermine free and fair elections. And today, the Democracy Docket team is working harder than ever before. They track the anti-democratic groups working to undermine free and fair elections, Republican voter suppression tactics, and much, much more. But in order to keep up this important fight, the team needs to grow and it needs your help. Support their work by becoming a premium member now at the link in the description below. I'm glad you raised that because, having worked for a lot of female candidates, including Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris at the presidential level, it's a real good question. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is not a knock, by the way, on Mondani and what he did in New York City, but honestly, the amount of fawning national attention on him relative to these two women,
Mhm.
both of whom just won absolute landslides. I mean, and by the
Humongous,
way,
yeah.
with big coalitions. I mean,
Yeah.
coalitions that span from the furthest left of the Democratic Party all the way into the
For
center
sure.
of the Republican Party. I think there is a legitimate question why in American politics we don't look at those women and say, why aren't they immediately in that tier?
Yeah, no, I agree. And Mikey's a great example of that. So that race was interesting to me because I went there because it was a feeling that it was tightening,
Yeah.
that the polls were getting closer and closer and closer. That turned out to be just a complete bullshit media narrative. By the way, I went to Montclair. I heard her speak at the No Kings rally. I, you know, again, this is like another moment of like me. I sat there and I thought, well, this is pretty good. I mean, they were as excited for her of all this, Montclair is her home turf, right? But everyone there, everyone else, I was like, they were pretty bored. And Andy Kim, who I love, who's this wonderful senator from New Jersey, anti-corruption, ran again, jumped in the primary to run against Menendez, very honest guy, had a kid who had a heart problem, which is why he was involved in Obamacare. I mean, you cannot do better than Andy Kim, but he's very sleepy. He's not he's a senator. He's not going to be president. I love him. Sorry, Andy. But, she got out there and she was like a rock star, and people are screaming her name and chasing her to her car. And I'm thinking to myself, this woman is somehow unable to deliver, and that's why the polls are tightening. I was pretty sure she would do well, and we did see that, in fact.
So look, I think that there is a type of candidate that the media falls in love with. And I think that Jack Ciattarelli, as crazy as he is, and I kept saying he's a fringe right-wing candidate, and people who are in politics and in the media were like, no, he's actually connects with voters. I think that he actually plays a type that, unlike Winston Sears, by the way, who I think that a lot of people in the sort of center left media establishment, they kind of look for him.
Yeah.
And so I think they overestimated his appeal.
For sure. I mean, I also think, and this was the thing I kept saying to people when they were like, and he's really connecting with black voters, is I was like, my man has been running, he has run for governor 3
Right.
times. Like, it's like these people get married and then get divorced and they get remarried. Like, that's never gonna work.
Right.
Okay? Like, if you are mad enough at the person to divorce them, then you are not gonna, like, it's just never gonna work. Okay? And that's what this is like. If you've run for governor 3 times and every time America's, New Jerseyans have been like, no thanks.
So you mentioned that you're taking Andy Kim off the presidential list. There's another senator from New Jersey who I think, some people have on that list. Cory Booker, really dynamic speaker, can be really compelling. Obviously, we've seen several governors around the country, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, although Gretchen Whitmer seems to say that she doesn't want to be president, which may make her pretty qualified for the job. Then
Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro looks like he's potentially Wes Moore in Maryland, and then of course there are other senators. Molly, you know, we have a history of senators running for president in this country. John Kerry
Yes,
ran
we
in one.
do.
Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama were both senators.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, we had a lot of senators run, including former vice president of the United States who became president. But remember, Elizabeth Warren ran, Amy Klobuchar ran, right? So what do you, I know it's really early, and I'm not going to ask you to pick who's
So
going to win,
mean.
but like, what do
Yeah.
you make of the field?
So, I mean, the good news is we've now seen what happens when you don't have a primary process. And it's not good. Certainly, what I feel from being informed over the last decade of just watching Donald Trump somehow manage to get elected not once but twice is that you have to have a really fulsome primary field and you have to let primary voters just hash it out with these people. Like, you can't, so does that, I mean, there are people in that list that I think are very talented. I would put Wes Moore on that list. I would put Gavin Newsom on that list. I would put Josh Shapiro on that list. I would put Cory is very talented too. But there are senators that are very talented. But Newsom is termed out at 26. So he will no longer be in office in 26. So that I think will be a problem. That is a problem for him. I think being able to add those 5 seats was a game changer.
Yeah.
And the fact that he could do a special election in 2 months, raise all the money for pay for it.
Over $100 million. Yeah.
Right. And then just.
And he won in a
kill it
landslide.
in a landslide. I mean, if you want confidence, like, I live in New York and my governor's like, well, we have to look at the thing and maybe, like we have to talk to the, like, fucking, you could have those redistricts as a sort of Damocles. You couldn't do them for the 26 cycle, but you could have them as a sort of Damocles for 2028. And she's just like, wow, we're going to have to confer. So, I think it's worth seeing that kind of effectiveness is pretty good. And that's a real question. So the answer is I don't know, but I certainly see some things that I like in just effectiveness. Politically, the worst thing Democrats can do, I think, and again, it's real early days, is make this about ideology and not make this about effectiveness. Like, it doesn't matter, I mean, I think it matters that they have like broad strokes of what, like, I don't think they should throw trans people under the bus. I don't think that's worth it. I think like that, or gay people, or, like, I don't think embracing racism or sexism or xenophobia is okay. But I do think like that the primary should focus on effectiveness and not on like ideological purity.
What about, something you haven't mentioned that used to be one of the defining features was geography. And you have both the House and Senate leader of the Democratic Party from New York, right? Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. You mentioned, Cory Booker's from neighboring New Jersey. You have Gavin Newsom, obviously, from California. Do you think that it matters that it would be so coastal? Is that an argument in favor of like a Pete Buttigieg, who's from Indiana and now lives in Michigan, or a J.B. Pritzker's in Illinois, or maybe Josh Shapiro, I guess, because it's not exactly, it's a more of a swing state. It's not a coastal state. Like, is that an argument, or do you just think like all politics is national now, and like this whole obsession about what state people add, remember the primary, like everyone trying to add states, like that's just not true anymore?
I don't know, because when you look at the Harris underperformance, and again, I'm going to say something that women say to each other, but not publicly, which is, did they not vote for her because she's a woman? We all say that to each other. We don't say it publicly because then men yell at us, right? I've said it publicly before, and people have been like, that's so stupid. There's no misogyny. What a dumb bitch. And I'm like, yes, you're right. There's no misogyny. Tell me how there's no misogyny.
I've said this. I think Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States, but for the fact that people wouldn't vote for a woman.
And
It
James
was,
Comey.
yeah. Well, and
And the
James,
Comey
right, and
letter.
James Comey. But I think that she was the victim of it, absolutely. All the people who say, they didn't find her likable, I mean, I will just tell you, having met everyone we've discussed, I've met every one of the candidates. I met John Kerry. I knew John Kerry. I know John Kerry well. I knew him at the time. I knew Barack Obama very well from before he was a senator. Hillary Clinton, one of the warmest people you'd ever meet. One of the most down-to-earth, just normal people you'd ever meet.
Yeah.
One of the smartest, just, straightforward. She's a
Yeah.
Midwesterner.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I could go on and on about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that's an issue. And Michelle Obama said recently, I think, something about this.
Yeah. So the question is, so when we look at geography, like, would, did she lose Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania has never had a woman on the top of the ticket,
Right.
right? They never have. Or did she lose Pennsylvania? I mean, so that I don't know. The one thing I will say about Pennsylvania, which I think definitely is a sort of in the Shapiro camp, is that he is still very popular in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And like very. And so that is something like when you think of like, I really like, I like Gretchen in Michigan, but she's not as popular as he is in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I also think she said she doesn't want to run.
I don't know what exactly has Michigan is such a complicated state, and now there's this weird, there's a weird three-way race
Senate
for the governor. No, for the governor.
Governor, right? Yes, that's right. There's a very
And then
odd
it's the guy
governor race
who's
set up. Yes.
maybe not. He's maybe an independent, but he's maybe a Republican. I interviewed him, but then I got some information that maybe he's not. He said he's just an independent, but maybe he's a secret Trumper. I don't know.
Speaking of your interviewing people, so you have a very popular podcast, now a very popular YouTube channel, and I hope everyone checks those out. You are also a contributor at MS
Now.
MS Now.
MS Now. MS
MS
Now.
Now.
MS
Okay.
Now.
Oh, it's not MSNOW. MS Now. Okay.
Yes.
Um,
My source for news, opinion, world.
Got it.
Swear to
Okay.
God. Swear to God.
You got that
Yes.
down. And you also have a Substack. You are literally covering the entire media landscape. And in all seriousness, I hope everyone subscribes to her YouTube channel and her Substack and her podcast is really excellent. And you were, for a fairly long period of time, you're going to tell me it wasn't that long, you wrote for Vanity Fair, which
3
is
years. 3 years.
yeah, which is
For
like
when media world is forever.
right,
Yeah.
which is also a famed brand, like in media, as is obviously the New York Times, which is like the most famous brand in media. So you kind of like run the gamut. You've got like the most prestigious establishment media print. You've got Substack, which is the most entrepreneurial and the place where right now a lot of the energy. You've got traditional linear television in MS Now, and also YouTube, and then in the middle of all that, you've got a podcast. So, what do you make of the media landscape right now from all of those perches?
So this is the thing you and I talk. We actually talk about this the most in our. I feel like we have two tranches of conversation. One is, are they coming for the Jews?
Yes.
Which we have to talk about more because we need to talk about Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and
Yep.
how the new Republican Party has a moment where it could really embrace anti-Semitism in a way that it hasn't
You
since
think
World
they
War
haven't
II.
yet? You think they? You
Oh
think
no,
they're-
they don't know. I mean, they have. Yes, they have.
This is
but they
usually
have-
how it goes. Like I am definitely in the they are coming for the Jews, and Molly is in the no, they're coming for Democrats.
Right, or some, but yes, right. No, it's true. There is, yes. Okay, so back to the media landscape question, because I'll just do that for a second. I don't understand. Like, I think that there will be a 24-hour news network. That seems like that's something people want. I don't think it can live on cable because most people don't have cable anymore.
Mm.
But I don't know where it lives so that you can like I would like to watch 24-hour news on my computer. I mean, like, why can't that exist? And where is it? And why is it having so much trouble getting on there? That's my biggest question.
So I think Google has an answer for you.
And which is what?
Well, I mean,
But
I
they
think their answer is a combination of YouTube TV, right, which is like
Right,
their competitor to cable, right,
right,
and then regular YouTube. And now how they're
right.
going to manage those two, I don't know, but I think that they figure they want to own that video experience. And I'm curious, in some ways the print stuff, Substack versus New York Times is kind of like been explored a million times by a million people. But I'm just curious, like how different do you prepare or do you approach video when it's, you know, Nicole Wallace or Morning
Right,
Joe, where you've got, big television cameras
right.
sort of on dollies, going all around the
Yeah,
studio, and you've got hair and
yeah,
makeup,
yeah.
versus when you do your own YouTube show or you're on Talking to Me on this channel.
So no, I don't wear that much makeup in real life. I don't even actually wear any makeup because I'm just like, you know. But and I also feel like it's a lot of work and you break out. I don't know. It's such a weird thing for me to be in a business where how you look matters because that is not where I come from. I come from writing, which is like nobody looks at you for days and you just, have twigs in your hair. So that has made me a little crazy in a way that it wasn't crazy before. But I don't. What I do for everything is that I just read. I try to read everything. Now, it's funny because I was actually thinking about this today. It's like there's less to read now because
Hmm.
there's less
Really,
places.
even with all of the Substack and all that?
Well, I read the New York Times because the thing I don't necessarily need other people's opinions. What I need is reporting.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll read, but it's not what I need is reporting. So I'll read the Times, the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, again, owned by Rupert Murdoch, their editorial page is like brain worms on, like, do not read don't even look at their editorial page. It will make you so angry. But the reporting is really good.
It's really good.
Um,
Yeah. No,
New,
they've broken a lot of news.
so New York Times, Wall Street Journal, ProPublica, and I like The Economist
Hmm.
a lot. It's really good.
That's good to
Um,
know.
yeah, and then I read the reporting in the Washington Post because it's still good. I'm one of the 10 people who still
I
reads
was going to say,
the Washington Post.
I like many others,
I
canceled my
can't,
subscription.
I just can't. I just feel like I have to know to see everything. That's why I stay on Twitter too. I mean, I just need to. The value for me is more in like just seeing it, despite the fact that I'm part of the problem, just being
So this is
there.
a true story. There is, Democracy Docket, a few months ago crossed 50,000 premium members. It has several hundred thousand free
Wow.
subscribers. And there is nothing that drives our subscription or membership numbers like the Washington Post. Whenever the Washington Post does something terrible, we see, and there are people who unsubscribe to the Washington Post. We see a huge jump. It's really remarkable. Like so, I sometimes think that and I don't want to speak for the Bulwark or the Contrarian or any of the others, but I sort of think like the Washington Post for a moment had an opportunity to roll up basically all of the people who subscribe to us
Yeah,
into a pro-democracy
and they
like
couldn't. Yeah,
news outlet, a
yeah.
editorial page and pro democracy news, and like literally Bezos was like, no, 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 let's do the opposite of that.
What has happened to the Washington Post is like one of the great tragedies because that newspaper was incredible newspaper owned by a great family that focused on, the Catherine Graham legacy. You can't, nothing better than sold to Jeff Bezos, who for a hot minute is like the
Right.
guardian, right?
Well,
And you think, oh, this guy really gets it. And then he divorces his wife, marries a sportscaster, I don't know, which is sort of a local news anchor, and then they just go off into the sunset to have foam parties on their yacht, and he just owns it and wants it to die. It's bizarre.
Yeah. So the other outlet that I feel that same way about, and you may disagree with me, is CNN. Like
Oh yeah,
I'm not under contract with any cable news
yeah,
show, and so you oftentimes see me. I'm on Nicole's show because I think Nicole Wallace's show is really excellent. But I don't. But I pick and choose. Like I don't have to do. Like I don't have to do. And I used to do Jim Acosta when he was on CNN, like back in the day. I actually used to do Pamela Brown. She had a really good show back in the day.
is she gone?
No, she's there. She's a different place. And
Right.
now I feel like CNN also, like for its own like ownership reasons, has also kind of like gone in this weird direction. They're not like the Washington Post, but
Right.
I mean, do you? I mean, I guess it's to the good for MS now, right?
I don't know. And that is a big question about like that is a real question is it to the good of MS now that CNN is bad? And in fact, because there are people who are mad at MS now, it's so weird. MS now for various things they feel the anchors have done or not
Oh
done.
yeah.
So I don't know. I think like as someone who has now recently done two events with Scott Jennings. Okay, one was this PBS Breaking the Deadlock where I didn't know who the people were, so I showed up and I was like, oh right. And one was I gave a paid speech with him about disagreeing better after the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I said, let's really disagree better. And then he said, we're at war with China. And that's why we have to build lots of power plants. And I thought, oh, you don't want to disagree better. You just want to antagonize the liberals. I think CNN just strikes me as there's just not a lot of news going on there, right? I mean, there certainly are people there doing news, but the clips that I see on the internet are people yelling at each other, which doesn't do anything for me.
It doesn't do anything for me, but also, I mean, this is like the way I felt about the Washington Post, and it's the way I felt about CNN. And far be it from me. I mean, they are media geniuses, and I'm just a lawyer.
Right,
Um,
right.
but like, did they never survey who their audience was? Like,
Well,
did,
that's
did, did no one ever like be like, oh, who is currently watching CNN under Jeff Zucker, right? Which was like a pretty forward-leaning pro-democracy tone to a lot of their coverage. Who was reading the Washington Post, right? Like, did they never survey that audience? Because like they basically in both cases alienated that audience, and it's not like Fox News viewers. It's not like National Review readers are going to come pouring in to either CNN or to the Washington Post.
this is the fallacy of light MAGA that there is a
Right.
voter,
Right.
that there is a reader who is MAGA but reads, who is loves Trump but also wants to read like real reported stories on Trump's corruption. And I think that's a false binary. And I don't think that there's a way in which you have those two things. And so, what is happening right now at CBS, which is a really good example, CBS, the crown jewel of broadcast, right? 60 Minutes, so much talent there, and they're more just talent, talent, talent. Barry Weiss, who I've met before, who lives
I
in
was
New
going to say,
York.
if ever there was a figure who would you would under you whether you know Barry Weiss specifically,
Right.
you must know like every Barry Weiss fan, like
Yes.
right because they're
Yes.
all like in New
Yes.
York City in the same sort of cadre of
Uh,
people.
the story with her is she wrote a newsletter that was able to appeal to very, very rich, powerful people. And I know this because about 2 years ago, one of my friends was saying, you don't understand. In Barry's newsletter, it says this, it says that, da da. And I said, I can't talk to you. I said what I say to all my friends like that. I say, I can't talk to you about this. I
But are
want
these
to be your
Trumpers
friend.
or not Trumpers?
They are a very small section of, and they're the richest section, and they're the donor class. And here's what they are Zionists, they are often Jewish, but not exclusively. They are very wealthy. They do not want to pay more taxes. Really, it's about taxes. And also Israel. Now, they hate woke culture because they feel it discriminates against wealthy white people. They're not racist. They just don't want other people, they don't like, what they don't like is this thing where what they don't like is they don't like people getting any kind of anti-racism. Now, you say, how can someone not like anti-racism and not be racist? And that, I don't know. So maybe they are secretly racist, but that crew, they don't like feeling that other people are getting their stuff, right? They feel they have for so long, so that's part of it. And they all really subscribe to the Barry Weissism. Now, here's the problem for that group. That group is about 20 people. It's not millions of people. The rest of the country is not Zionist, wealthy, blue state living, liberal. They're fine with homosexuality. They are socially liberal, but financially don't want to have to pay taxes. That's not, that's, at best, that's 100,000 people.
Right. Not enough to sustain CBS.
Yeah. And so I think one of the big problems that Barry's going to have, and quite frankly, well-deserved from my purview, is that she's going to have to figure out how to make socially liberal but fiscally conservative appealing to a broad swath. And again, what you saw, she did a streamer. One of her first things she did a streamer with Hillary Clinton and Condi Rice about the peace in Israel, which, by the way, there's no, in case you want to follow up on that, there's no peace in Israel. That thing didn't work, or I guess it sort of worked, but they're still fighting. It's what it was before, but yeah, and nobody watched it because nobody gives a fuck about that.
No, that's exactly right. Well, Molly, you and I are going to have to continue this for another day. I can come on your podcast. We can pick up the Nick Fuentes, Donald Trump connection, and so much.
You're going to come on my podcast,
and I will.
We'll talk about it. Yes.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Molly Jong-Fast, the amazing one. Thank you for joining me.